Good morning, guys. It's Miss Coconut. How are you doing? I'm doing well. So, listen, I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about the weather. Now, it is no surprise to most of us that the government of all um, countries have the ability to manipulate weather. But what I found so interesting is that people are being bombarded in Texas, right? They are literally being left to die. They have to fend for themselves. They have to figure out how to have basic necessities like heat, light, shelter, and food while the state is being bombarded with snow out of nowhere. A lot of people were not prepared. They're not used to this kind of weather. And the power grids went down. And it's just a big, whole sad mess. But of course, my little brain starts thinking like, what is going on with Texas? And, why? I always have to find the why. Because to me, everything is, always multi-leveled, right, with me anyway. So I started to dig around, and I don't even know how I came up with this story, but I must have Googled something about Texas and weather, and it led me to this interesting story that I want to share with you. So, in Texas, in a place called, and I don't want to mess it up, Waxahachie. It's a native term, native Indian word, which loosely translates to like the trail of the cow or buffalo. Okay, there was a project that was planned by physicists in Texas that Congress gave them all this money for to build something called a superconducting super collider, SSC. Okay, and this was basically back in 1971. So they were going to build what is now known as like a CERN collider over there in wherever it's in Geneva, I think. So they got all of this money, almost like $2 billion. So that's a lot of money back then. And they started to dig the tunnels, okay? And I actually have a picture of the landscape when they were planning it. And it's so interesting. There's a circle with what appears to be a faint pentagram. Do y'all see that? So they were just showing like how far and wide the tunnels would be built. And all of the people that were behind this project were trying to get, like financial support from Europe and Canada, Japan, and Russia and India. Okay, and this would have helped us gain prominence in the field of physics. And basically what we were trying to do at that time is build this super collider so that we could discover what created the world, the God particle. Okay, I'm sure you've heard a lot about that. And you probably have heard the word CERN before, and you understand that they are able to go into portals and dimensions. They can create worlds. They can create energy. They can create and manipulate weather. All of this information is out there. All you have to do is research it. Anyway, after all of this money had been sent, had been spent, had been promised, they shut the project down because they said it was poor budgetary management. That's all the reason that was given. Basically, they were squandering the money on parties and stuff, and no real progress was made. So they shut this very high-profile project down after they spent at least $2 billion. And then nothing was ever done. So it sat desolate and abandoned for years and years and years. And all of the underground tunnels were actually filled, allegedly, with water. There was some news about some sinkholes occurring because of the underground tunnels. I found all of that very interesting. What I found most interesting about this story is that usually when projects of this size are abandoned and no one talks about it, it's usually more behind the story. Of course, I don't know what that is because I'm not privy to it, But I did want to go over some points with you about weather manipulation, what's occurring in Texas, and energy. So anyway, as if the story of how America almost became known as the discoverer of the Higgs boson, which is the particle that shapes the theories of modern day physics, okay, which was discovered in Geneva. So that was a huge moment because they are calling that the God particle because they believe they have figured out what shaped or gave mass to the world, okay? And so what should have been a big deal for America became something that was covered up, and I don't even want to say laughingstock because really no one talks about it, which is so odd that all of this money and manpower was thrown into this project and basically you never hear about it again. Now, the state of Texas definitely has a lot of UFO sightings. I just want to say that. It has a lot of stories about ghosts and it has a lot of stories about aliens, okay? And all of those things you can look up at your leisure and discover some very interesting tales. But after this project was abandoned, it sat and sat and sat until it was finally sold. Who was it sold to? I'm glad that you asked. The property stayed abandoned for a while. Lots of different companies thought of things that they could do with it. You know, like a pharmaceutical company wanted to use it as a distribution center. Hospital centers thought about it. The government thought about it as a training facility, and on and on and on. But in 1999, a production company actually purchased filming rights so that they could film Universal Soldier, the movie, right? That movie is actually about dead soldiers that were in Vietnam fighting that were brought to life by some kind of reanimation technique. Hello. Anyway, at some point, the property was purchased by Johnny Bryan Hunt, also known as J.B. Hunt. He was a multimillionaire, and he did purchase the property for $6.5 million, and he wanted to turn it into a secure data storage. It was going to be named the Collider Data Center. And then, 6 months into this, he slipped on ice, code word there, slipped on ice, broke his skull, and died. Interesting that the man slipped on ice, broke his skull, which all deals with manipulation, MK Ultra, and ice, okay, because we are right now in the height of the winter blizzard down in Texas. And so the project sat until a company bought it out by the name of Magna Blend. Magna Blend basically is a company that deals with oil, energy, packaging solutions. They had a big fire at some point, and then they moved into the SSC complex, and then they were bought out by Univar. And Univar offers lots of products. It deals with chemicals, though, and the distribution and packaging of chemicals, as did Magna Blend. So I thought all of that was very interesting. And it led me to wonder. One thing I noticed about Texas, the energy grid is not owned like by the government, okay? And so it's sort of like a self-contained unit. And the energy company is called ERCOT. I guess that's right. Anyway, they sold off some of their energy contracts because they didn't expect to have to use it. And now they find themselves scrambling to be able to provide, energy sources to their people. It made me wonder because when I looked up ERCOT, I could not find out who was actually sitting on the board. Like, who makes up this company? The company is made up of a collective, actually. So it could be some people that are... Anyway, according to their website, it's a membership-based 501c4 nonprofit corporation. It's governed by a board of directors, and it is subject to oversight by the Public Utility Commission of Texas. The members include consumers, cooperatives, generators, power marketers, retail electric providers, investor-owned electric utilities, transmission and distribution providers, and yeah, I thought that was interesting. I couldn't follow the rabbit hole down too deep because apparently they started taking down the names of the board of directors and things because they were getting death threats because apparently some of these people don't live in Texas. So some people feel that's a conflict. But anyway, I would not be surprised if all of these businesses are washing the hands of each other and that this story is somehow all related. Obviously, it definitely comes down to money, where the money resides. I would bet that there is some contract holding between these companies that I've mentioned just because of the fields that they're in. And as usual, the poor people pay for what the rich people say. That's just how it goes in this world, right? So we are sending good thoughts, warm thoughts to the people of Texas. And thank you so much for listening. I know I haven't solved anything, but I just wanted to bring light to a subject that you may not have been aware of. Does the government hold secret experiments? Yes, they do. We have no knowledge of whether or not this is what is happening in Texas, but besides the money aspect, they do a lot of these experiments because they are always trying to manipulate our world and the people within it. Thank you for listening. As always, Om Shri Bezi.